Georges St-Pierre came out and he was talking about having a dream of being a martial artist, having done martial arts, but then going into Renzo Gracie's gym and working out with these great and elite guys. And he decided he was done. This is not for me. The gap here is too big. I'm never going to be able to close it. This is not what I was expecting. He then reassessed, came back. Look, you all know the Georges St-Pierre story, but I was just reading that and I realized how compelling that was. And I will tell you, that is a very real thing. And here, let's date it back real fast. There was a gentleman who had come out, and I cannot recall his name, but he had his own fighting system, and it was called SAFTA. SAFTA. When he came out and fought, and this was back in the SEG days. This was UFC 3 or 4, definitely no later than 5. And he had created his own art, just like Bruce Lee did. Just like Bruce Lee created Jeet Kune Do, JKD, this guy had created SAFTA. And he went out and fought, and he had Mark Kerr. And nobody really knew, like, what maybe SAFTA is the way to go. I mean, we had pit fighting back then and SAFTA. Then you had some of the traditional, some of the boxing or Muay Thai or Taekwondo. We didn't know what SAFTA was, but we know this guy's got his own martial art and his own gym and his t-shirt that says SAFTA on it, and he's the one that created SAFTA. That's a lot like Bruce Lee did. I mean, that's all we knew. So they come across the ring, and Mark Kerr reaches out, grabs the guy, knees him one time. The guy falls down, fade to black, roll the credits. Well, that guy wasn't some dirtbag that was out trying to peddle a martial art that just didn't work. This guy was a trained guy, but he never actually tried to apply it. He had applied it in theory, largely in his head. And he was devastated. I mean, he went away. You never heard from him again. I heard from him about a decade later in an interview. And it was one of those pieces like, where are they now type deal. And, you know, that guy had turned, I mean, he had very dark thoughts, suicidal thoughts. He turned to drugs. He turned to alcohol. And it wasn't because of the embarrassment. There wasn't even a lot of people watching back then. I did watch. Could not produce his name. Couldn't even tell you what SAFTA stood for. But in his mind, it was real, and everything got turned upside down. His vision of reality got turned upside down, and he began to question not only himself as it pertained to the skills that he thought were applicable in hand-to-hand combat, but he began to apply that to just other things in life. What else am I wrong about? What else do I believe with the bottom of my heart that I've got wrong? And I will tell, that's a very real thing. I can remember my first fight. And all I knew about fighting and how I would react character-wise and competitor-wise was going to be all aces. I mean, I got this whole thing figured. I'd watched enough fighting. I knew exactly what to do. I'm going to pump this jab. I'm going to come with a cross. I'm going to dig to the body. I'd never even sparred before. Never. First time I put on the small gloves was in the locker room at the venue before I walked up to compete with this guy, and I borrowed those gloves from my buddy Marcus, who happened to be on the same card. So I get in the ring. I'm doing exactly like I had envisioned every single... There isn't anything touching my opponent. I mean, started to understand what range is. By the way, the fatigue, the exhaustion in conjunction with the anxiety, and I was a college wrestler at the time. I was in great shape. I was working out 3 and 4 hours a day, very high cardio type stuff, but this is a different sport. This is a different posture with different movements and different setups and different fears and anxiety, different time frames. At that time, there was no round. It was 1 7-minute round. Well, in a wrestling match, you had 3 rounds and it was 7 minutes as well, but there was a little bit of a break in between and a toss of a coin, a discussion with your coach. There was timeout rules. There was just different things. But I don't know any of these things until I'm throwing this jab just like I'd seen guys doing on TV, except it's not touching anything like the guys on TV did. So now you're confronted with this reality that you really thought in the bottom of your heart was true, and you find out it's not. Now, that's just called experience. That's called being naive. That's nothing that anybody else hasn't experienced at some point of their life. But when you truly believe it, much like the gentleman who created SAFTA, much like my first experience, or much like George's in the gym, when the reality that you believed was true gets turned upside down, yes, one reaction is to want to quit. That's very real. I only quit the sport one time. Retired a couple times, but I only quit it once. I was in Japan, and it was like 2002, 2003, and I was just reminiscing about this with my corner man, Ryan Parsons. And what they were doing back then, the show was called Pancrase. And they did Team Quest versus Team Renzo Gracie. And I'm not even sure we took on Renzo's team as much as Renzo just cornered the guys that we took on. Because I know I had a local guy from Japan. I had a local guy. But I remember going out there, and I didn't have a whole lot of experience. 2002, fights were hard to come by. It started in 97, but this is still number 5, 6, 7 for me. And I had just watched some tapes the night before in the room. I was very impressed with some guys that were able to get a guy down, get to position, and just unleash and get out of there with a TKO in like 30 seconds. I go, well, I got that same skill set. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get in there tomorrow night. I'm going to do exactly this. Come on, throw the guy down, pass, get to mount, and I just start pounding away, but they don't stop the fight. And now old Chael is exhausted. 30 seconds into a 15-minute contest. So, I'm running on field. I am in full mount where all I have to do is this. I stop doing this. I'm that level of exhausted. But I'd also never tried it. I saw it on TV. I thought that's something I could do. Decided to try it in live competition. So the fight goes on. It's long, drawn out. It goes to a split decision. He wins. I go to the hallway, but I wasn't down in the dumps at all. And that would devastate me to lose a competition, particularly flying all the way to Japan, particularly the way that it was set up. I'm representing my team versus another team. And I remember going in the hallway and I was at complete peace, absolute peace, because I was done, because I quit. I'm out. I get it. Not cut out for this, not training the right way, not understanding this right, whatever it was that I had to compartmentalize. I had done it and I was at peace. And I put my clothes on, I supported my teammates, and we went out to get some. I flew all the way home, fully at peace. Now, I only had to recess for a few days, much like George did, and you get right back on that horse. I think if you look at that story, I think maybe the gentleman from SAFTA, the only thing he did wrong, because he didn't experience anything that the rest of us haven't experienced in some capacity. The difference was he did not get back on that horse. He did not get right back up and try again. Work harder, get better, try from some of those things. I think that was one of the differences. I will look back at the boxer, Peter McNeely, who ran into Mike Tyson and got embarrassed and his whole life kind of fell off track. He spoke about that. I'm not speaking out of school. But I think that might have been one of the problems too, is just looking back, he never got back up and tried again. And you can get back up and get bucked off again and get bucked off again, but you try again. There's something very real about that. There's something very real about taking these lessons, even if they're the opposite of what you believe to be true, and using them as a positive to help formulate a roadmap for the future to get you to that end goal.